Like they call it the doghouse.
Okay, we are back for UFC 288. Henry Cejudo and Aljamain Sterling for the bantamweight strap in Newark, New Jersey, and I'll be honest, a relatively lackluster card. However, we have got Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad in the co-main event. Obviously, initially it was supposed to be Oliveira and Beneil Dariush, but unfortunately Oliveira got injured, and other than that, I'll be honest, not really many fights that I think stick out to me. You got Andrade against Yang Zinao and Mozart Evloev. It's not really, I would say, the most action-packed card. I'll be real. Drew Dober as well in the prelims. There's not really many I think that would really stick out to me, in my opinion. However, we don't complain because I really like this main event and the co-main event. I think with the UFC, I think we're getting to that point. Summertime, that's when the big fights traditionally do get made. And yeah, I do think I like this one though. I do think it's an intriguing one, especially with Henry Cejudo coming back after so long and a big fight in the welterweight division. But I'm going to go through the two main events, the co-main and main event, as they are the real action-packed ones, and I feel they're the ones that are best needed analysing them. Again, because there's a lot of fights that are almost in the middle. There isn't really any young contenders that you really think are going to explode off of this, and there aren't really many fights that are deep that will really affect divisions. You got Marina Rodriguez and fighting, but Vima Jandiroba, and again, maybe it's an interesting fight, but nothing that I think really excites the MMA masses, in my opinion. So we are going to start off with the co-main in Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns. First thing to note, credit to Gilbert Burns, because this is a very, very fast turnaround. I mean, you consider UFC 287 was literally in April. We're now in May. Not even a month has passed, because it was the 8th of April that it was, and I think this is 7th of May. When was the... I'm recording this like a few days before the 7th of May, so it's literally just under a month where he would be competing. So credit to him, he didn't really take much damage in the Masvidal fight, so I don't think there's really much to really go on. And really, I hope more fighters do this, because whilst I do understand, like, you got to recover from fights and have to be very careful, I like what a Chimaev does, where he'll fight 1 week, then fight another. Not possible for fighters, I know, but my point is, I feel like fighters, I just prefer to have a bit more of a quicker turnaround, especially when you don't take much damage in fights. I think it's a lot more beneficial. It's what I used to love about McGregor. Yeah, he would fight Shawn Mendes, then fought Aldo, then fought Diaz, then fought Diaz again. It was so quick how fast he was fighting, and yeah, I do wish fighters did this more. I'll be real with you. Usman and Adesanya, to their credit, were extremely active. Adesanya is a champion now, but when he was champion in his first reign, as you could call it, was fighting all the time. Same with Kamaru Usman. So I like that. I think the credit has to be given, because I think for fighters to build their name, they really need to sort of get the activity up. And I think that's one thing I give credit to Burns for. And yeah, a very intriguing fight, this one. Bilal Muhammad, not exactly the most popular figure in the world, but a good fighter nonetheless. People give him a lot of stick, but I think I don't think he'll ever be a champion, if I'm being honest. I don't think he's got the level. He won't be, I don't think, a Colby or a Usman or a Leon or any of these guys, in my opinion. I look at him and I think he's a good fighter. I don't want to say gatekeeper, but I feel like he may be that. But yeah, I don't he may be champion. I just don't see the skill set. I think the striking is very poor, and it's not like a Kamaru Usman where his striking, that you can see there's a bit something there. But like with Usman, I always say the Henry Hoof striking helped him, I think, because then when you went to Trevor Whitman, who ironed it out a little bit more, it felt as if it was just a natural evolution. With Bilal, I know he finished Brady in his last fight, but really it wasn't like, even the striking, he finished him on the feet, but it wasn't exactly a thing where he was piecing him up and beating him. He was just he was piecing him up, but it wasn't like he was having vicious combinations and all this kind of stuff. It was just him just keeping up a onslaught, a little bit like when Eddie Alvarez beat RDA back in the day. Terrible strike, like his striking was winging all over the place, but he was just had enough there to get him out of there. But it's good. I think that finish was good for Bilal because that's what you need. You need to try and get up. People don't like him because he goes to decisions all the time. Somebody said he's like the Meg Griffin of the UFC, which I found quite funny. But yeah, an intriguing one. I like Burns in this one though. I think stylistically Burns is a better striker, and his jiu-jitsu is a problem. And Bilal is a good wrestler. Don't get it twisted, but I don't think he's that good that he could just keep Burns down, not do anything to him. I think with jiu-jitsu guys, there is some wrestlers that really have the style for it. I always thought Chimaev's style actually would be good for against Burns' jiu-jitsu because of his pressure and the way he kind of just ties you up. But for whatever reason, he decided to brawl with Burns in that fight. But a Colby, I don't think he's wrestling good against Burns. I think the same with Usman. That's why I think Usman decided to strike with him, and I think it'll be the same here. I don't know how much Bilal really wants to go to the ground with Burns, and yeah, because of that, I just think on the feet it's all the power difference. And Bilal's chin, he's not been dropped. Well, he has been dropped, but he's been hurt a few times. Edwards wobbling him with a head kick. It kind of shows me that he's not one like a Vittori who can just walk through strikes. I think he can get hit. Yeah, I like Bilal. I think he's a good fighter, but I just don't think he gets this one done. I think Burns takes it. I think it will be a decision victory for Burns. I don't really see him. Maybe he could stop Bilal. Maybe in the third round I can see him stopping Bilal. But Burns isn't. If you want to have a war with Burns, he will have a war with you. But really, he doesn't overly commit unless he really has to. He's very, very. I won't say he's a safe fight. I think he's somewhere in between being wild and being safe. He kind of is a good middle ground that he has. I think he does it when he feels it's necessary. I mean, Masvidal Ali was striking a lot, so I think he's got it in him to beat Bilal. I think if he wins this, to me, give him the title shot. I don't think Colby deserves it, but I think they'll give it him. But if hypothetically they don't get that fight made, I think Burns and Edwards is such a great fight. A fight that I would have liked a long time ago for the when Usman was champion, for those two to be contenders, but didn't happen because of whatever COVID and stuff. However, I would like to see Bilal, Burns, and Edwards though. I think that would be such an intriguing fight stylistically. A few years back, I think those two had a little bit of beef, so I think you could sell it a little bit. But yeah, a very intriguing fight this one though, Bilal and Burns. Bilal wins. Possibly a shot at Leon to try and get that rematch, even though he was getting beat quite comfortably in that fight. But you know, obviously, with Bilal, I feel like people don't want to see him win. He's kind of a funny character, but I do think that I think he's certainly at a certain level. I just don't know if he can really break into that top. There's a top tier of welterweights to me, and I think Burns is in there, of an Usman, a Covington, and Edwards, and I just don't know. I think Burns is just below it, and I think Bilal's below him, so that's the problem. But great fight nonetheless, and I'm interested to see what happens. Then we go on to the main event. We got Aljamain Sterling versus the returning Henry Cejudo. Aljamain Sterling obviously getting the win over TJ Dillashaw in his last fight, even though Dillashaw was injured. And Cejudo, obviously, his last fight, all the way back in 2020 when he beat Dominic Cruz, so a very intriguing stylistic fight, this one, and it's intriguing for a few reasons. Cejudo, for as good as a wrestler as he is, has decided in his career, in his last few fights when he was fighting, he had a bit of a karate stance. I don't know why. He doesn't. I think Khabib said to him that, he talks about striking, but you're a wrestler. Why not use that more? I don't really get that, but nonetheless, he uses it very well, the striking, and he was able to catch Dominic Cruz with a beautiful knee up the middle and then finished him with the ground and pound. Maybe a bit premature, but whatever. I think he was going to get the win regardless of Cejudo. He's beating Cruz's legs up. And one thing about Cejudo, I give him this. He's such a smart fighter. You watch his breakdowns on his YouTube channel. He knows the game inside out. He told John Jones about the positioning, and Jones used that against Sorogan. Cejudo, he knew how Dominic Cruz's movement was such a problem, so what does he do? He kicks the legs. You look at against Marlon Moraes, he was getting beat, his legs was getting chopped up, but he knew Moraes would tire, and he kind of just kept getting him in the clinch and running those knees and to the body and to the face. A really amazing fighter, and truly one of the more intellectuals, I would say, in this game. However, there is a little thing with Cejudo. I don't really think people saw him in the way that I think he wanted to be saw or seen, if that makes sense. He's a great fighter, but he obviously did this whole Triple C thing, trying to be that cringe character. The problem that you got with Cejudo, though, is I just think that because of the division he's in and because of just certain personalities, he just never clicked with, I think, the public. And he retired. And he's the only guy, I think, who's retired who's a relatively big name, where Dana didn't really care if they were coming back or not. He kind of just left him to it. He wanted Khabib to come back. He was calling for GSP to come back, Dana. But with Cejudo, what he did was just like, you know what? You want to retire, do whatever. I don't really... He didn't really seem bothered. And he wanted the Volkanovski fight, and Dana basically said no. It's just like, he just hasn't really... He wants to, I think, be a bit of a bigger name, but... I don't want to say nobody cares, but I don't think it would have been a big thing for people if Cejudo never came back. I think people could have just lived with it, which... Again, it just some people have that thing where people want to see him fight. And Cejudo, kind of a great fighter, but not somebody who I think really moves the needle, maybe, is the phrase I think Dana uses. But I like Cejudo, though. He's a great guy to listen to when I hear him speak. And I do think when he does his little fight breakdowns, he's very emotional, a bit biased with some of his stuff, especially with the Adesanya Pereira fight. I felt he went a little bit more on the Pereira side than Adesanya. But yeah, I do wonder how he is though after so many years. He did get a little bit fat in that time, but it happens. Khabib did the same thing. Why you got to stay in shape when you're retired and you've done all that work? So yeah, and one thing I'm curious about in this fight is this would have been an interesting fight regardless of if he wasn't coming back. One thing about Cejudo, which why people also don't really give him that love and respect, is that he kind of, his record, so his last few fights, so he beat Dominic Cruz. Fight before that, I think it was the Moraes fight, which was his best performance in my opinion. He did so good in that fight, and he really performed, I think, to a level which I didn't think he was even capable of. Before that, he beat TJ Dillashaw. Before that, he beat Mighty Mouse. Problem that you got, people thought that Mighty Mouse won that second fight, quite a few people. I felt it was close. I think I did give it to Mighty Mouse at the time, but now I don't know, I haven't watched it for a while, that fight. And I also remember his leg going limp in that fight for that few seconds or a minute or so. He fought Moraes, which I think people gave him a bit more... I mean, no, he fought TJ after he fought Mighty Mouse. Dillashaw, who was a skeleton in there, and knocked him out, obviously, within a few, 30, 40 seconds or whatever it was. And because of that... Actually, it wasn't 30, 40 seconds. It was actually... I remember the fight was going for quite a bit, but he did knock him out in the first round, I think, if I remember correctly. Again, look at the total strikes. TJ literally landed one strike in that fight. Says it all. Was able to get him out there pretty quickly. But when a guy is depleted, as bad as TJ was, I just think, there's a little bit of an asterisk there. Moraes, he got respect, and I think he should have. It was an amazing performance. And then he fought Dominic Cruz, who's an old man in there. He's not the same guy. So it feels as if his record looks good on paper, but in reality, there's a lot of things that go into that. But I think, personally, Cejudo is one of the greats, but I think there's always a little bit of a asterisk with him. With Aljamain Sterling, however, the champion, the rightful champion, a man who got a lot of stick, a lot of criticism in his Pyotr antics and what have you, but he's shown, came back, won that rematch. I thought he won the fight. Came back, beat Dillashaw. I know Dillashaw was injured, but I think he was winning that regardless. And he looked very, very good in that fight, Sterling. His striking's a bit wild. It's not fantastic. There's no power in his punches, really. But it's good enough. And I think his jiu-jitsu, the way he takes the back, is lethal. What he did to Sandhagen should show you how dangerous this guy is when he gets your back. Almost like a human backpack in a way, a little bit like how Damian Maia was. And I really, I think Aljamain Sterling really is underrated, an amazing fighter. And I think he's not, maybe I won't say amazing, he's very, very good at a specific skill set, but he mixes everything up quite well. And that's why I personally believe his adaptability is why I think he beat Pyotr Yan. Pyotr Yan never adapted. He just kind of wanted to take his head off. And I think you can never fight emotional in there. And I think that with a few fighters don't really adapt. They kind of stay the same, but just tweak little things. Sterling adapted, and I think he's a fighter because of how he is. He's quite loose on the feet, relatively good striking, and very good jiu-jitsu, and his wrestling's good. So there's a few things that I think work in there. You know, he went very gung-ho in the first Piotr Jan fight. In the second fight, he was more relaxed, and I think it shows, you know, having adaptability, I think, is one of the best things for a fighter, because it shows that you can adapt and change to each style, which is important. Because ultimately, I think the longest reigning champions are GSPs, the Anderson Silva. Anderson's kind of fought the same way in fairness most of his career, but I think that was due to the opposition, due to the fact that nobody really knew what to do with him at the time. But GSP adapted in his career. He went from being a wrestler into mixing up with the striking, then focusing more on the wrestling. He obviously came from a karate background, and I think Aljamain has that ability. I'm not saying he's as good as him, but I just think I can see why I feel as if he will be a champion for quite a while. I think O'Malley would be an interesting fight for him, though, I will say. However, regardless, into the fight. Intriguing, like I said, because I don't know how Cejudo's going to look. I think, personally, he'll look the same as he did when he came back. It's not been that long since he retired, so 2020 is 3 years. It's not that long out of the game. Some fighters don't fight, even who are active, for 2 years, so I don't really see much of an issue there. John Jones came back and looked fantastic. Well, not fantastic, but he looked very good against Surugan. And so, yeah, I feel Cejudo's best bet in this fight, I do think it would be to keep it on the feet. And I think pick Aljamain Sterling with the legs. He's very good. His movement is quite unpredictable. Sterling very unorthodox. So I think stopping him, doing a little bit of what he did to Dominic Cruz, I think would be the key. And I personally feel Cejudo's best bet is just to mix this up a lot. I don't really know if Cejudo, who hits harder out of the two. I think Cejudo, I would go for the one who hits harder, but I don't know. It's a very hard one to really tell. But I really like I like this fight for that reason. It's not really, there isn't really a way I can see one guy clearly winning, which is the thing, because Cejudo's wrestling is very good, and I don't know how if Aljamain will be able to take him down easy enough. However, Cejudo makes some mistakes. He does sometimes overextend, and I think when that happens, I could see Aljamain taking his back. The timeout inactivity is still a thing. I know John Jones looked very good, but it does affect some fighters. I remember looking at McGregor when he fought Khabib and always thinking that inactivity would hurt him when he fought him, and I think ultimately it did. And look at Nick Diaz when he came back against Robbie Lawler as well. He looked all kinds of it just felt wrong watching him in there. So I think it affects some but not others. But if I had to really guess, I think he'd be alright, Cejudo. But I think for Aljamain Sterling, Cejudo's body shots, his body has always been open, I felt, for someone to really dig those shots in. And in my opinion, he's quite a stocky guy, Cejudo, so I feel like his gas tank would be good, but I just don't think he'll be... I think out of the two, I'd wager that Cejudo gasses before Sterling does. Wrestlers are relatively good cardio, some of them especially, who have that pace, but some do struggle. If you dig the body a little bit, you kind of see they kind of don't really know how to handle it. And yeah, I think for Sterling, the body shots would be key. Personally, for Cejudo, I just think you keep this at boxing range and not kicking range, and I think you got a lot more success. Like I say, leg kicks are going to be key, but I do think if you are able just to walk Sterling down and kind of be the aggressor, I think he's your best bet, because I don't see if his wrestling approach is going to work against Sterling, and I also don't think his... I don't know if the way he fought Dominic Cruz would work completely against Sterling. I do think, like I said, the leg kicks I think would be very vital, but I'm not sure how it would be against a guy who is as nimble as Aljamain Sterling is. But intriguing fight, this one. Prediction, I personally can see Henry Cejudo missing a kick, Sterling taking the back, getting the body lock, punching Cejudo, and eventually finding the choke. I actually, you know what, I could see him dropping Cejudo as well, potentially. I know Sterling's not got power, like I said, but, you know, you move your head at the wrong time, you hit and the guy hits you with the right sort of power at the right time, you can drop. And I could see that happening. I could see him dropping Cejudo, Sterling, and then getting the back and getting the rear naked choke. I'm going to say like a 4th round submission. I feel Sterling will get it done. I think Cejudo's good, but I think this may be the same even if when he was fighting. I just feel like stylistically, I think it's a real weird fight to kind of analyze because they're both good, but I just don't know, man. I feel like Cejudo's got the power advantage slightly, but I don't think it's a lot in this in terms of stylistically. But I can just feel. I feel like Aljamain is his time as a champion, and I think he's showing that he's got a chip on his shoulder still because people kind of don't really look him. They look at him as a champ after being Jan and Dillashaw. But again, with Dillashaw, he got an injury. I think there's so many asterisks behind him, and I think you beat Henry Cejudo. I don't think many people will question you, even if he is coming off the layoff. But either way, intriguing fight though, and yeah, interesting card UFC 288. I will do a review afterwards. Like I said, I think Burns gets it done, and I think Sterling retains the belt. But an intriguing card nonetheless, and I'll be excited to see how this one goes. And yeah, until next time.